Well, good morning, everyone. I think we're going to go ahead and get started. I'm realizing as I look around the room, I actually know a lot of you, which is really a pretty cool thing. Well, so my name's Scott Rauch, and I'm the president and psychiatrist in chief at McLean Hospital, and it really gives me great pleasure to be able to welcome you all to this, our inaugural Technology and Psychiatry Summit. I think already it's outstripped some of our expectations, and hopefully it will live up to everybody's expectations over the next couple of days. It's really a tremendously exciting time in the field, and I hope that's well embodied in these couple of days together. I want to begin with some words of welcome, but also words of thanks. And to begin with, I'd like to say some words of thanks to the organizers of the event. First, I do just want to mention Dr. Justin Baker, who is the founding scientific director of the Institute for Technology in Psychiatry. And I do want to say that I think we'll probably lapse into the jargon of ITP over and over again. We founded this institute at McLean just about a year ago. So thanks to Justin and also to the two co-directors of ITP, and in particular Dr. Laura Germain, who's the technical director of ITP and who chaired the program committee and was really the lead organizer of this event for the next couple of days. And also thanks to Dr. Ipsit Vahia, who's the medical director of ITP, who, along with Justin and Laura, you'll be hearing from later. I also want to make sure to acknowledge one of my other partners in crime, Dr. Kerry Ressler, known to many of you. He's our chief scientific officer at McLean and a member of the executive committee of ITP. And while I'm sure Laura will say more words of thanks also to our two ninja coordinators, Nick Marin and Sarah Vogel. So please, a big round of applause for the organizers. I also want to thank our speakers. We really just have a fabulous crew of featured speakers and moderators over the next couple of days. And here I'll just highlight our keynote speakers, Tom Insel, who is with us these next couple of days, as well as Holland Lisenby and Roz Picard, and they'll get due and appropriate introductions before they speak. I want to say thanks to all of you, the participants, for joining us. I think the nature of this meeting over the next few days, we intend to be really robustly participative, and so really everybody who is here is part of the show. And finally, our sponsors. We really couldn't have done this without a wonderful array of sponsors listed on the slide there, and hopefully you'll hear more about them over time. But in particular, I did just want to single out and give special thanks to our platinum level sponsor, the AJ Trustee Mental Health Research Fund, in proudly supporting this inaugural summit event. So my job over the next few minutes is just to set the stage a bit for what we'll all be engaging in here over the next couple of days. And if my bet is right, maybe over the next couple of decades or more. So, as an institutional leader, you always start with mission. And in this particular case, I have to say we have about the most compelling mission imaginable. And while there are many statistics that we could fill the page and more with that speak to the scale, scope, and depth of behavioral and mental health and psychiatric illness as the root of the compelling mission, I really do just want to remind everybody here about the human cost of mental illness, especially mental illness that goes untreated. There's really almost nothing more frightening for an individual with a new episode or onset of psychiatric illness, and in some way that fear and uncertainty is shared often by an entire family or a surrounding community. So needless to say, these are incredibly common illnesses. They don't just affect those people over there. It is literally every family that is touched by psychiatric illness. 4 out of 10 people will be affected during their lives. You can see that in the current state of things, it's only a minority of patients who get what they need, let alone what they need when they need it. Psychiatric illness in general is our leading cause of disability, with depression being number one, and you see the huge financial cost as well. So in level setting, part of, in some ways, what's so exciting about these couple days is that people come from very different backgrounds here. So we're going to do some degree of level setting. Just to give you a sense of some of the current leading challenges in psychiatry today, it starts with the science and evidence base. Frankly, we still have limited knowledge about the pathophysiology of these disorders. Our current treatments, by and large, tend to be only partially effective, and that's if people get them, which often they don't. There's a great need to personalize care. Currently, the standard of care in psychiatry really involves quite a bit of trial and error, so there would be great benefit in being able to match patients with interventions. We have grand challenges in terms of service delivery. We need to do better with screening and early intervention and access to timely care. We have inadequate functional capacity. Even if we sought to make an investment much greater than today, there are great challenges in growing that capacity. And we also need to educate the public to help eliminate perceived stigma. The economic factors are really profound. Currently, care is under-reimbursed, and we also definitely need more cost-efficient models of care. So to match some of these challenges with potential opportunities that get to the potential of technology in psychiatry, the trial and error approach really calls for the opportunity for more personalized medicine, where we can actually predict what the best treatment choices are as well as to guide the regimen. So not only who's best suited for a treatment, but exactly when and how long it should be given. Similarly, hospitalizations are costly, and there are very high rates of rehospitalization. To give you a sense, in the state of Massachusetts, for our Medicaid population, people with psychotic illness, about 25% are rehospitalized within 30 days of discharge from a hospitalization. So we need to do better, with the hope of also predicting acute events so that we can intervene more effectively. It would be tremendously useful to be able to predict the flashbacks of PTSD before they happened, panic attacks, emergence of psychosis, exacerbation of depression, violent events, substance use relapses, increases in symptoms of any one of a number of disorders, let alone, of course, if we could predict and prevent suicide. We believe that real-time mobile engagement really gives us leverage on that, also with the potential of bringing treatment. And then finally, we struggle with long lengths of stay in inpatient units with some degree of contention and downward pressure from insurance companies. It would be wonderful to have better leverage on knowing when the right time would be to discharge a patient most effectively. So, it occurred to me that when we talked about technology in psychiatry, in fact, over these couple of days, we're really going to be talking more about digital technology. But as someone who is a recovering brain imaging scientist, I can tell you that, of course, there's a long history of technology in psychiatry. And in some ways, two of the best examples are the technologies that surround brain mapping science and the way in which knowledge about neurocircuitry has been leveraged to have effective treatments through targeted neuromodulation. And in fact, one of our keynote speakers, Holland Lee Lisenby, is one of the world leaders in neuromodulatory therapies. And of course, another example is all the technology that's been brought to bear with regard to molecular neuroscience and genetics. And there too, there is a history of trying to leverage that technology for better diagnosis and therapeutics. And so it occurred to me that where many of us believe that we're sort of at an inflection point with digital psychiatry, that one can actually map some of those other revolutions in technology and psychiatry. This index is just one of a number of publications or citations during that time. And what you can see is just from the advent of functional MRI in the early 1990s, this nearly hyperbolic curve upward over the ensuing couple of decades. So now when we talk about technology and psychiatry for this particular meeting, focusing on digital technology, you'll see that the outstanding symposia and posters and data blitzes that we hear over the next couple days, we'll be talking about things like wearables and mobile devices that will enable passive data capture, digital phenotyping, more refined ecological momentary assessment. It will encompass telehealth, that is from apps and internet-based diagnostic and therapies, including internet-based cognitive behavior therapy, to teleconsultation and virtual visits, as well as ways to leverage the electronic medical record with enhanced communication and documentation, decision support, data mining, and services research. We are a field that actually is sorely in need of methods for what's called case mix risk adjustment that, unlike other fields of medicine, we've really not yet been able to quantitatively really evaluate severity of illness as it relates to subsequent cost. So it's sort of interesting, you know, how do you know when you're at an inflection point? Sometimes maybe it's because you've been there before and you know what it feels like. I would just say that my bet is that we are similarly at an inflectional point for digital psychiatry. And it's so interesting that the team here sort of did a search, and that where we are in 2012 to 2016 with regard to citations and publications for digital technology and psychiatry as search terms perfectly emulates the curve for functional MRI in psychiatry in those analogous 5 years. So play the tape forward 20 years and imagine where we'll be in 2035. So I think the future is exciting and bright. I'm going to make just a couple of more points before I hand the podium over. I realize that many people in the audience are not clinicians. And so I just want to remind people that really the gold standard clinical evaluation in psychiatry is the traditional mental status exam. It's actually part of what's considered the physical exam in medicine. And its elements include, in the office, in a 15, 20-minute meeting, elements that include probes of motor activity, speech, mood and affect, thought, and cognition. But it has really tremendous limitations, the way it has been practiced for decades, if not centuries. It's subjective, tends to be qualitative, specifically non-quantitative, tends to be cross-sectional. Really, while one gathers mental status information through maybe a 40 or 50-minute interview, the formal part of it is often 5 or 10 minutes at the end. And so it's just a snippet in time, and it's a snippet in time in a very artificial environment, often the doctor's office or an emergency room. What's so exciting, just one of the facets, is that with digital technology, there is this potential to move from the traditional mental status exam to the new wave digital mental status exam, that we can talk about having objective, quantitative measures that are continuous, integrated over time, and gathered in situ out in the real world. And similarly, we can have measures of movement and activity and voice patterns and features and vocal and facial affect, physiology, apps that probe social behavior and language, and certainly measures of cognition that relate to speed of response, attention, memory, and response control. I also just want to show this slide because I want people to be thinking a bit about what is really the functional unit of psychiatric care the way we deliver it today. One can think about psychiatric care over a lifetime, but in some ways for many patients the functional unit is an episode. And now really how is care rendered across an episode? Typically, unfortunately, patients get severely ill enough that often they have to present to an emergency room. And then from an emergency room, often they're admitted to a hospital where they stay for an indeterminate amount of time, but let's say maybe a week, and then they're stepped down or discharged to follow-up care and hope for recovery. But as I indicated, relapse and rehospitalization is all too common. So as you think about this as an episode of care in the context of what are typically chronic and recurrent illnesses, I hope you can imagine all the points of potential intervention. Can we follow people out in life so that can we screen effectively? Can we identify these onset or relapse episodes in advance, avert the need for acute hospitalization, let alone a trip to the emergency room? Can we provide the care in a more tailored way so that inpatient stays are right-sized and hopefully shorter? When we discharge people, can we deliver care right to where they are more effectively? And can we know in advance if they're about to relapse so that that can be prevented? I also just want to acknowledge that big data is very exciting, but big data is not enough. I love this little cartoon because some of you know I was a soccer player. Many of you have read the book Moneyball, but it says, remember, the other team is counting on big data insights based on previous games, so kick the ball with your other foot. It's important to be able to generalize from the data we have to the real world. So we have to manage big data. Certainly we saw that with imaging and genetics, whole new technological and mathematical sciences. We have to analyze it, scrub it, reduce it, find ways to predict, maybe through AI and machine learning. We have to integrate not only across sources, but across platforms and think about interoperability. There are also challenges at the organizational and regulatory level with regard to data sharing, privacy, and confidentiality. Many of these things will be spoken to over the next 2 days. There's great excitement, not only in the clinical realm, but also in the research realm with regard to having enhanced behavioral phenotypes. The benefits in many ways parallel the benefits that I've focused on in the clinical domain. The quantitative and objective nature, their granularity, the notion of integrating data across multiple modes, that the data are gathered in situ, and again, that they can be temporally integrated and continuous, that they can be integrated with other biomarkers, and that ultimately they can provide better measures of outcome that will allow us to accelerate studies and discoveries in terms of new treatments. These next couple of slides just give you a sense of graphics that have emerged in the early days. This, I think, is a great graphic that represents well some of the leverage of enhanced behavioral phenotypes using these tools in a research context, honoring the structure of the research domain criteria. And this comes from a recent popular perspective from John Touris and J.P. Anella, who will be speaking over the next couple of days. And this, I know, a favorite slide of our own Justin Baker, a complex slide that again speaks to the movement from data to information to knowledge and wisdom across all these sources. So in summary, before I leave the podium to sort of kick things off for these 2 days, I just want to say this is an incredibly exciting time in the field. We have a profoundly compelling mission to drive us. There are formidable challenges and opportunities that span care and research, as well as the technical domain and many other disciplines of science and beyond. Technology has opened new vistas before. It's like the birth of a new day. And digital psychiatry may well enable a genuine revolution in our field, and such a revolution is sorely needed. Advances can be accelerated by bringing together experts from various disciplines. And I lived this in brain imaging. It was really one of the exciting aspects of bringing together experts from all these different fields to solve the challenges. And that's right where we are right now with digital psychiatry. So with that, I'm going to pass the podium. It really is my great pleasure now to be able to introduce Dr. Laura Germain, who is the lead organizer of this event, and as I mentioned, chair of our program committee for this inaugural Technology in Psychiatry Summit. She's the co-director of McLean's Institute for Technology and Psychiatry, as well as an instructor in psychiatry at Harvard Medical School. Her work is oriented around understanding cognitive functioning in health and disease, which includes building software for studying cognition and behavior using the web and mobile devices. In 2005, Laura created what was really one of the first online neuropsychology laboratories, which evolved to become the now famous testmybrain.org. which hopefully we'll hear more about. And she also now leads the Laboratory for Brain and Cognitive Health Technology at McLean Hospital. So Laura is going to walk us through, I think, the program of the next couple of days and also lead us into the first panel. So I hope you all have a great visit, a great couple of days together. I know I'm looking forward to it. Please join me in giving a big round of applause for Laura Jameen.